There's a strong case to be made to go without Salah and Trent, and you're going to see why in this video. Building from the back in the first draft, I have gone for the Palace goalkeeper. I'm not sure if it's going to be Johnston or Guaita. We'll see that in pre-season, but you get the point anyway. The main plan is to rotate him with Areola. That's if he does play for West Ham because Fabianski is out of contract and he's only 4 mil. It would be ideal if that's the case. That's because there's no difficult fixture from a defensive perspective all the way up until game week 18. If he doesn't land that way, then it's not the end of the world. I don't mind the Palace defence anyway. They've got decent defensive fixtures, but it does open up other options. Brighton have got a 4.5 mil goalkeeper, and the same would apply to Brentford if Raya leaves. Pickford's only 4.5 mil as well. He's got very nice defensive fixtures up until game week 8. Problem is, Everton's defence is poor. Moving on to the defence, I have got Reece James for 5.5 mil because I think he's an absolute bargain, especially with Chelsea's fixtures. Obviously there is an injury risk there, but I'm willing to roll the dice because I think he's worth it. There is the option to go for Chilwell instead at the same price, but James has more promising underlying stats. Chilwell doesn't have the best injury record either. I think we can apply more weighting to James having a higher upside than Chilwell, than a scenario where James gets injured and Chilwell doesn't. Next up is a defensive rotation of Botman and Henry, who are only 4.5 mil each. Despite Newcastle's tough start to the season, when you combine their defence with Brentford's for rotation, there's no difficult fixtures from a defensive perspective all the way up until game week 20. It doesn't feel right having a 4.5 mil defender on the bench, but it's like having a £5 million defender when you can rotate them, except from you get to pick the fixtures, and to be fair, Botman should be at least that anyway. Another thing is that we get a decent option that's nailed on the bench every game week. My other defender on the bench is Bayer. He plays for Burnley and he's only 4 mil. The other two options were Baldock from Sheffield United and Bell from Luton Town, but I prefer him because he plays for a stronger defence. Something I will be monitoring for all these players is minutes in pre-season, so don't forget this is my first draft and a lot will change between now and game week 1. Completing the defence is Ake. It will either be him or Akanji because 5 mil is dirt cheap for a City defender. Not only have they got the best defence in the league, they've got the best opening defensive fixtures as well. Also, if you've not already watched my video on the best defensive fixtures, make sure you watch it because you will gain an edge over most FPL managers. They tend to consider generic fixture difficulty ratings or ones that are just based on an attacking perspective. Anyway, back to the City defender. City are the first kick-off against Burnley away in game week 1, so we might get leaked team news there. That'll decide whether I pick Ake or Akanji. I do prefer Ake because he probably will play as a full-back. As you can see, I've gone without Trent. Now if Trent does play midfield throughout the whole of pre-season, then I will have to bring him in. But if he is a defender, I don't think I will bring him in for 8 mil because the points per million potential there isn't very high and I would prefer to get an £8 million midfielder instead. As you can see, I've still got a decent reliable defence there and I've saved a few mil per player, and don't forget I will be investing that in midfield. Of course, if he is a defender, he's still valuable because he's a wing back. I just don't know if he'll be worth 8 mil compared to how much it ties the rest of my team down. Moving on to midfield, I've got an Arsenal midfield double up of Saka and Martinelli. Now I do prefer Saka because he's more nailed and he's on pens, so it was more Martinelli versus Foden. I might still bring in Foden yet, it's just Martinelli's got higher expected minutes. I'm much more likely to bring in Foden if we get leaked team news and we know he's starting for that opening fixture. I have got another midfield double up and this one's from United. It's Bruno Fernandes and Rashford. Something I really like is the longevity of United's fixtures. They're completely fine right up until game week 17. If you combine that with the expected minutes of these two players, these are two players I probably won't be transferring out, which means I can focus my transfers elsewhere. That's the same for the other two players in Saka and Martinelli, obviously more Saka as well. And then my defence is slightly more riskier. Obviously I hope that Ake isn't a victim of Pep Roulette and James doesn't get injured, but we should be fine there of having 3 starting defenders every game week. I've heard a lot of people discussing Rashford, and rightfully so, I've got him in my team as well, but not quite as many people are discussing Bruno. They are saying that he's quite good value for money, but if you look at the underlying stats last season, they're actually better than all 3 of the other midfielders that I've got on screen. That's just for non-penalty. It's probably on penalty duties as well. When you've got reliable midfielders like these that can provide high value for money, why on earth would you go for Salah who you won't even captain for 12.5 mil? I've had a look at a captaincy matrix and I'd only captain him once in the first 8 game weeks. That's poor value for money. And my last player in midfield is Matoma. He kicks off against Luton at home. Then he's also got Wolves away, and I might still even own him for West Ham at home as well. If you priced him for those first 2 or 3 games, he'd be one of the most expensive midfielders in the game, but when it comes to game week 4, he does face Newcastle, then Manchester United in game week 5, so I do plan on selling him, but it's not the end of the world if I do keep him for 6.5 mil, but the other players that I've got that are quite nailed allow me to play aggressive. This is why I've left a mil in the bank. After those fixtures, I can pivot to a 7 or 7.5 mil midfielder, and there's plenty to choose from in that bracket. Right now, my favourite would be Sterling because he would have Luton at home, Forest at home, then Bournemouth away, which are juicy for attacking fixtures. There wasn't much between the Brighton midfielders when I was picking them. I just think Mitoma's the most reliable. I do like March's underlying stats as well. Obviously with Gross, if he's playing quite far forward in midfield in pre-season, he's probably on penalty duties, so I will consider him more. Obviously with Enciso, he's a mil cheaper, so he could be more value for money. I'm not sure about his minutes though. I don't like Brighton's fixtures from game week 4 onwards, but at least I've got mostly nailed players that allow me to play aggressive. As you can see, I've maxed out the first team midfield with 5 instead of 3 forwards or 5 defenders. That's because there's more options in midfield when I created a watch list. I think there's more sustainability when it comes to transfer options going forward. I do prefer to go for a 3 at the back formation. It not only gives me a high ceiling in attack, but for this season, if you look at the £4 million defenders, they're much more viable than the 4.5 mil midfielders or forwards. Up front, I've got Jesus to complete the Arsenal triple up. I think their players are very underpriced, and I do like their fixtures. At that price point, I can move to Nkunku in game week 3, Isak or Wilson in game week 6, or Watkins in game week 8. As for my 4.5 mil bench forward, there's no obvious option yet, so I'm not leaning towards anyone, but I'll keep doing some research right up until game week 1. I'm sure an option will emerge before the season starts. If you've made it to this point in the video, you might as well hit the subscribe button because you've clearly found the video informative. And it goes without saying, completing the forward line and the team is Haaland. I don't really like using this word, but I think he's essential, and that's right up until game week 8, and I will consider selling him. That's because he doesn't rank high in my captaincy matrix from that point onwards for a few game weeks. If you want to have a good start to the season by making the most of the fixtures, I've published a best attacking fixtures video and a best defensive fixtures video. Take your pick.